Several months back, when I was gearing up for an interview with the Transformers animated story editor Marty Isenberg, I asked you guys, my audience, via a few social media posts, if you had any questions for him. In my research series, TFA Mysteries, I've been using Marty's replies to your questions to fill in some of the gaps about what the 4th season of Transformers Animated might have been like. However, not all of your questions fit within the constructs and the narratives of the TFA Mysteries episodes. To tide you over before the TFA Mysteries Season 1 finale, later in December, here is an hour or so of Marty Isenberg answering questions that didn't make it into TFA Mysteries. Enjoy. Who's your favorite character?
I always go with Sentinel.
Yeah.
I like the jerks. Again, it's the thing that you couldn't do with Autobots prior to Transformers, is make an Autobot a jerk.
Yeah.
Give Autobots flaws, even as a society.
Yeah, the comics always did that, but animated as a show did it the most, definitely.
Yeah, and that was that was my sensibility. Is it's boring otherwise. It's not it's not believable.
I want to ask this question.
Okay.
From the audience. So what episode are you most proud of?
There's a lot of them. It's like choosing your favorite child. I will say that there's a lot of things about TransWarped that I'm really, really proud of. I'm proud of the depth that we got into that story. I'm really, even though it wasn't my part of it, just the animation that we got in that opening battle was phenomenal. And that's, if the whole series could have looked as good as that, it just would have been certainly would have made the three of us very happy. Mm-hmm. So, and just as far as a personal favorite, I always enjoyed Garbage In, Garbage Out, of the ones that I wrote myself. I just thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a nice combination of comedy and action, and it's all the things that I wanted to put in the show kind of in one episode. So I was fond of using that as a writing sample, just to kind of show potential employers that I can do it all.
Conversely, if you had to erase one episode from existence, like something that was rushed or forced, which would it be if you had to choose?
I seem to recall that the animation that we got back on Megatron Rising was not good. And we had to insert a lot of those transformation cutaways that were very well animated. So ironically, it became a lot of people's favorite episodes because there was so much of that. But the actual animation that came back for Megatron Rising was really...
I've been saying this for years. Megatron Rising Part 2 doesn't look that great.
Alex has been saying that for so long.
It was very disappointing.
I think Part 1 looks amazing, but Part 2 was like...
So I think if we could have not necessarily thrown it out, but if we got a do-over from overseas, I would have liked to have seen the episode animated better.
There's the Dinobot scene. Was that animated or was it cut in the board phase where Megatron fights them?
I think everything that was cut in board. We wouldn't have. I don't think we ever animated a scene that got cut, like a complete scene that was cut.
The reason I asked him about this specific scene is because of this article I found from the Cybertron.com forums. An interview with Marty Isenberg from 2008 when the show was airing, where he talks about deleted scenes and states, Megatron Rising lost a significant scene, but not for time. The animation that came back from overseas was simply unusable. So I can reveal here for the first time that the Dinobots were supposed to join the battle in Part 2. I would consider this interview from the time of the show's actual production to be more reliable than an interview with Marty 15 years later, where his memory's a bit foggy, but that's just me.
We recorded all of that stuff. Yeah. So like the Beachcomber scene was recorded, and Tom Kenny voiced Beachcomber, and he had a funny thing where he was reading the script at home and he said, "Oh, this is a fun character. I like this. Oh shit, he dies."
Okay, I know Derek was more of the let's add all the characters guy, but a handful of people asked, were there any characters that you specifically really wanted to add? And someone mentioned aerial bots.
Not really, because I was not the Transformers expert in this.
Oh yeah.
I didn't grow up on G1. I was a little too old for it. I was in college when it came out, so I didn't have that kind of connection to the show. So I really relied on Derek and Matt, mostly Derek, where I would say, I need a character that's like this, and he would say, oh, well, let's use this character.
Yes.
So I really had no attachment to any specific character. Having written the Beast Wars, Beast Machines characters, I always had it in mind that we would build off of that Black Arachnia, that little gag at the end that brings those characters back and give her a little more of a techno-organic army that could reuse those characters. I loved, and this was Derek pitched it, but I loved using Rattletrap, and I wanted to use him a lot in season 4.
Yeah.
He has a big role in Trial of Megatron. So I just liked that he was just this sleazy character.
Yeah, he even had like a dedicated episode in one of the one of the pitches.
Yeah, we loved him. So we wanted to use him more and more, because he was a kind of character that you wouldn't see in Transformers, where he was an Autobot, but he was sketchy.
So slimy.
It's really funny. While discussing the cut flash forward episode Bumble Prime in TFA Mysteries episode 5, Marty brought up an idea for a human villain, not mentioned in the production Bible, who had been tossed around by the show's staff in various earlier seasons: the Time Trucker. Here is a clip of that.
We had always wanted to do a time travel episode, and it goes back to even season 1, where a number of characters were developed because they were named after Hasbro executives. So Angry Archer was Aaron Archer, Slow-Mo was Samantha Lomo, and we had one for Steve Drucker, who for some reason they were calling the Time Trucker. And so we constantly were trying to find, well, what's the Time Trucker episode? And we may have even pitched it for season 3. It was one of those ideas that would always get kicked down the road. But that was the idea of bringing in the Time Trucker to do this flash forward episode.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit, but are there any canceled episodes from seasons 1 to 3 that stand out to you? We talked about Time Trucker.
Well, one of them I made into a comic book. That was the Wraith. That was proposed for season 1, but never used. It was proposed as a character. I don't know that we had the story. And a lot of those sort of leftover episodes in your list were sort of perennial ideas that we kept going back to the well.
This is my favorite question. Someone simply asked, do you think Rodimus is cool?
I didn't at first.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I thought he was kind of lame. And then we worked him into to TransWarped. And then Judd Nelson was so cool. And he was just so into it when he came to record. I really wasn't sure what to expect. And he was great. So we're like, oh, we got to use him more.
Nice.
Was he in the booth with everyone else, or was he just on his own recording?
I think we may have recorded him separately with some of the actors. I seem to recall recording him on his own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember him being with the cast. I think maybe schedule didn't allow for it. And also because his role was pretty small, we didn't want to have him sit around for an entire episode waiting for the cast. So we may have included the cast just for that scene, but I don't recall my visual, the picture I have in my head is it was just Judd in the booth. And what was interesting was that Judd and Sue had never met.
Oh, really? Wait.
Even though they were sort of, I guess, Arcee and Rodimus are sort of an item in the movie. The two of them had never met until that recording session.
Were you present at every voice recording session?
Yes, I even directed one because Sue was not available.
Wow, that's awesome.
I directed. It was Human Error Part 2, I think.
Wow.
It was because I actually got to direct Weird Al.
That's awesome. So this question is from Little Miss TFP. She asks, what is your favorite behind the scenes moment with the voice actors?
Oh boy, there were a lot of them. The first one that comes to mind was when Weird Al came in, and I talk about this a lot in conventions, but I'll say it here. When Weird Al came in to voice Wreck-Gar for the first time, there was just buzz around the building, around Cartoon Network, like, oh, Weird Al's here, Weird Al's here. It's like everybody was really excited that Weird Al's coming in. And the script did not, the casting call did not have a role for Tom Kenny.
Yeah.
So he was not part of the cast that day because we deliberately worked it out so we wouldn't have to record any of his characters so that we would have room to bring in Weird Al. But Tom wanted to come in anyway because his son was a huge Weird Al fan, to the point where he thought he had discovered Weird Al and was going to introduce him to his father, as this great thing. And Tom was like, I knew about Weird Al for years. So he thought he would surprise his son by bringing him to the session. So Tom concocted some excuse, like he had to pick up a script. Could his son just come into the building with me it'll just take a second. Just come in with me. And he walks in and Weird Al is sitting there and this kid's face just turns red. He can't believe that he's in the presence of this guy that he worships, and he can barely get words out. And it was just a great, and Al was great and so gracious, and happy to answer any questions. And then it turned out that we miscounted, and there was a role that we didn't have cast, and all the other actors were at their limit. So we're like, well, Tom, can you step in and do a voice for us? So he ended up voicing the police officer.
You are interfering with police business. Please disperse.
Yeah, you are interfering with police business,
Exactly.
whatever he said.
So it's a good thing that he wanted to surprise his son. Otherwise, we would have had to have someone pick it up the next session.
Really quickly, I had a SD card get full. I'm going to go run and get another one. Alex, could you ask this one for me?
Okay. So what are your favorite movies and shows that give you inspiration, maybe not just for animated, but maybe in general,
Well, I'll answer that for animated because otherwise it's a very long list. But one of the things that I did before I sat down to write, I don't think it was the pilot, because the pilot for animated was actually the Nanosec episode. But when I actually sat down to write the movie, the Transformer Rollout movie, I sat down and I watched The Iron Giant and I watched Lilo and Stitch, because for me that was the tone that I was trying to get in the series. Is if I could, get an amalgamation of those two movies, that would be ideally where I wanted Transformers animated to be.
Yeah,
so those were a big influence, particularly in the early development.
Yeah, I can see it.
I've heard you answer this before, but just for the sake of completionism, someone has asked, would Black Arachnia and /or Waspinator have reverted back to their non-techno-organic forms?
Probably not. Didn't have specific plans for how we wanted them to end up, but I liked the idea of this of Black Arachnia assembling this techno-organic faction that would challenge Megatron, and sort of complicate things for the Autobots as well. So I think I probably would have kept them in those forms.
At one point during our discussion, Marty started talking about TFA Soundwave and how the group liked to write and utilize him.
Seems like he worked well, or he worked better as a one-off, because he didn't have any real affiliation with Autobot or Decepticon. He just kind of had his own agenda. So his stories tended to not be a big part of the arc, so we could insert them where we chose.
So someone has asked, what is your process for writing episodes?
Basically it's done in steps where, as I've said, it starts with, on animated in particular, it started with the three of us just batting around ideas, things we'd like to see. And then once we were actually starting an episode, we would generally bring in the freelance writer, invite them out to lunch, bat around ideas with the freelance writer, kind of talk through a basic structure of the beats of the episode, and have them write a brief premise. And I might give them notes and have them do a revision of that. And then we would go to a full outline, which is breaking down the story scene by scene with act breaks. And again, there would be 2 rounds of that where the freelancer will write a draft. I'll give notes. They'll do a revision. Then I'll do an edit, and then that would go off to Hasbro and Cartoon Network for approval. I think before we would send it off, it would probably go to Matt first for his approval. So he might have a round of notes. So I might do revisions on my edit. And then once we got approval from Hasbro and Cartoon Network hardly ever had notes on anything. And Hasbro would generally have a few sort of, basic, product line kind of notes. Then we would send the writer to script. And again, they'd give me a draft, I'd give notes. They'd give me revisions, I'd do an edit, that would go to Matt, he'd give me notes, I'd do a revised edit, that would go off to the powers that be, and they would give their notes, and we would usually do a second draft, and if necessary, a third and final draft. Sometimes we ended up recording first drafts, as far as the first draft that we sent to Hasbro and Cartoon Network. Some of that was just for time, and some of that was just they liked what they saw and had bigger fish to fry. So it's an ongoing process. It's kind of a dialogue primarily going back and forth between me and the freelance writer, but also a dialogue going back and forth between me and Matt and Derek, and often the director of the episode. And it keeps, at each step, it would keep getting refined. And the certain things would just become clearer and ideas would come up. So eventually it would all conform to what we felt the show needed to be.
All right, thank you. There's 3 more fan questions left, so we're in the end game. We already talked about this, but someone asked. I already asked them this at TF Nation, but were there any plans for a Bumblebee Prime in the future, like in the Flash Forward episode?
We always wanted to do that story. I think Derek pitched it, around season 2 or season 3. But because it was never attached to kind of a larger season story arc, it always felt like kind of a one-off, that it was easy to yank out of the lineup if other bigger priorities came up. So I think given an infinite amount of time, we eventually would have done that story and found a way to have it make sense within a larger arc, but we just never got around to it.
We kind of like know the answer to this one, but we're all the backstories from flashbacks planned from the beginning.
Nothing was really planned from the beginning. I think the first one we did that in was Thrill of the Hunt.
Unfortunately, Zoom lagged and froze here. We'll never know what he said.
I lost the way that they would use flashbacks to illuminate the story in the present, and we,
flashbacks were probably used the best in this show out of all the Transformers shows, definitely.
Yeah, so I think because that one worked, then we decided, well, let's do more, and what's Bumblebee and Bulkhead's story, and what's Prowl's story, and what's Prime's story, and so it did become a thing, but I don't think we had
more connection issues. We can tell a story to pass the time. You start. You tell the story, viewer. Oh, never mind. He's starting.
And I don't recall that Thrill of the Hunt was initially pitched as having this big backstory to it. I'm not quite sure whether that came from Andrew or whether that came from us. But really, and this was a character that even predated my involvement with the show, is that they just wanted this character, Lockdown, who was a hunter, and wanted to get Bumblebee's thrusters for reasons.
Yeah, I think we read that in the production Bible.
Yeah.
Which is
but beyond that, it hadn't really been thought out. So then it was just a matter of coming up with, well, why does he want Bella? And what's his deal? And okay, he collects souvenirs from everybody, and that's his. So it's like, well, does he also? I think we had this thing where there's in Derek's design, there was like something missing from Ratchet that we never defined what it was. And so probably Derek came in and said, well, maybe he was the one who stole, was responsible for removing whatever that thing was that Ratchet had. And so it's like, well, what would that thing have been? Well, he's a medic. Maybe it's some sort of something he would use for the robot equivalent of anesthesia.
It was two things. It was the wound on his arm, and it was the thing on his head.
Right. So I think it was that's and that was Derek's design. That was his picture telling a story, and then us, sort of extrapolating, well, what is that story? So there was a lot of that kind of synergy. Between Derek would just draw something, and then we'd come up with a reason that it existed.
I kind of want to ask this question. Well, Megatron, he was very manipulative and very, cunning in his ways in seasons 1 to 3, but he seems kind of kill crazy in the season 4 outline, bloodlusted. What like prompted this change, and would it seem organic for the character? Like, how would it seem like that?
Well, I think there were a couple of things that prompted it. One was our feeling, or my feeling in particular, that Megatron was kind of played out, and that to continue to have him be the uber villain and continue to lose would just continue to water him down as any kind of real threat. And also, conversely, would continue to water down the Autobots, because they would defeat him and then he would always come back. So it just felt really repetitive and not interesting as a character to have him, be this sort of manipulative genius who keeps failing. So there was that. I mean, originally we really didn't want him to have as much of a physical presence in the season at all. It probably would have been closer to how he was played in season 1, where he was very, very limited by what he could do, and then maybe by the end he would have busted out. But it was a couple of things. I mean, we felt like if we have to bring him back to Earth, which we really didn't want to do in the first place, what's his motivation now? His motivation had always been to conquer Cybertron and restore Cybertron to its former Decepticon glory. So why the hell would he go to Earth? And so we just said, well, he goes to Earth because he goes mad. It's just something happens that makes him insane. And that was really the only reason we could justify him going to Earth and choosing to be a threat on Earth. And I think what we decided was, well, he's going to turn Earth into the new Cybertron. Since he can't have, Cybertron, he'll make his own Cybertron in a sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it just felt, and then we could have, well, there was some talk about, well, what if we make him a triple changer? What's the cool thing we could do with Megatron, toy-wise, physical-wise? So someone pitched making him a triple changer, and then we thought, well, maybe there's something in the whole triple changer program that makes you go nuts, like Blitzwing. Like it's very unstable preprocessor, so that we could justify, Megatron being this sort of savage killer. And I think also there was probably an aspect of maybe making him more like the movie Megatron.
Yeah, like the original.
Like from the Michael Bay movie.
Oh.
So, who was, as much as you can discern any kind of characterization from that movie, it seemed like he was just a savage.
Yeah, I can understand.
So I think maybe there was some element of conforming to the movie Megatron as well. So that's kind of where we landed. I mean, it was just taking something that we really didn't want to do in the first place, but being told, well, how do we make this make sense?
It seems like Derek always wanted to do Galvatron after Megatron.
I think we batted that idea around. I really wanted to make Black Arachnia more of a strong villainous presence. And there was, I think Derek liked that because he was a big Beast Wars fan. But there was always resistance from Hasbro because they didn't want to make Beast toys again.
Until now,
it was quite an out. I mean, I was shocked when I found out they were going to make the Waspinator toy.
Look at Hasbro today, making a bunch of Beast toys today.
Yes.
Yeah. So it all cycles.
Yes, it does.
What they think the toy buyers want. So, but there weren't Beasts in the Michael Bay movies, so we're not making Beasts. That kind of thing.
Lastly, I would like to ask Marty about the messy production of Season 3's premiere, TransWarped. For those of you who don't already know, Season 3 was not intended to begin with a three-parter at all. Episode 1 would have been Homecoming, where Sari is mad at her dad, but after a fight with the headmaster, she learns to trust him again. Episode 2 would have been Upgrade. Sari, still left out while being a robot, upgrades herself with her key, but unfortunately overloads and causes a lot of damage in the process. In Season 3, Episode 3 would have been Three's a Crowd. Bulkhead recruits a Mixmaster and Scrapper to fix a hole in some Dak Tower. However, they create Dirt Boss. In the B plot, Bumblebee accidentally transwarps around the galaxy with the Plasma Dynamic Thruster. When all three of these scripts were in production, and in fact the first one completed and recorded, Cartoon Network, after the success of the Transformer Rollout series premiere, deemed that they wanted Season 3 to begin with a three-parter as well, halting production and forcing Marty to pick up the pieces, picking storylines and subplots, smashing them together, adding a storyline about Omega Supreme, and creating a 66-minute special event out of 3 completely unrelated episodes. In the early days of my channel, I made a video trying to piece together what scenes came from which episodes. While the main storylines were pretty obvious, Sari and the Key and Sari and the Headmaster, several of the other extraneous scenes were far more difficult to piece together, and ultimately, I had no idea. With a chance to speak to Marty Isenberg, I've decided to clear this up once and for all. So you had the 3 episodes, Homecoming, Upgrade, Three's a Crowd, and then that's when Cartoon Network says they want a 3-parter. So then you have to take apart Three's a Crowd, you extract the B plot, you throw it in, then you write a whole Omega Supreme plot, and you stitch 3 episodes together, and it's somehow like the best episode of the series, despite the fact that it's just Frankenstein. Could you just explain that a little bit? Because it's amazing to me.
It's a little amazing to me too. I think it was just, necessity is the mother of invention. This is. I mean, just first of all, just the shock of we were deep into those scripts. I think the first one had gone final, and the other 2 were in second draft. So we were deep into those scripts, and they put the brake on things. So that in itself was shocking and a little disappointing. But then when they came back and they said, we want to age it up, that's why we're putting the brakes on it. That was really exciting to us, because my experiences had always been, particularly with toy-based sales, is when they put the brakes on it, they have to age it down because the much younger kids are buying the toys, and what we're doing is too sophisticated for that young audience, so we got to dumb it down. So the idea that we could toughen it up was exciting to all of us, and the fact that they were willing to pay some extra money for the production of that big opening battle scene. They were able to pay for Matt to storyboard it himself, as opposed to farm it out to Japanese board artists. So that gave us the opportunity. I don't even know if we had the complete story we talked through the three of us talked through who's going to be in that battle and what would the beats be. And we talked that sequence through in detail. And the level of animation that we were able to get back from that sequence it was phenomenal. That's the best thing. Honestly, I think it's the best looking thing in the show. So there was that. There was just simply the excitement of being able to do that scene. And then just sort of piecing things together. The mandate being, let's age it up. So I believe, and this is my memory, I believe that the intention was that there was going to be a big showdown between Omega Supreme. The original plan for season 3 was we were going to do Devastator. So that's part of Three's a Crowd was going to be sort of the lead-in to Devastator. So I think the plan was, what our big climax for season 3 was going to be Omega Supreme versus Devastator. And then, among all the other things we were being told is we can't do Devastator. It's just from a toy production, it's not going to work. From animation production, it's not going to work. So we had to let go of that. So we decided that what's our big climax? Our big climax of the movie is we're going to take away the thing that we were going to do for the climax of the season, and Omega Supreme goes bad. So it's the Autobots versus Omega Supreme, and then sort of extrapolating, well, who gets control of him? There's Megatron, the Starscream. And then with the mandate to age it up, I'd always had this backstory vaguely for Omega Supreme. There's kind of inspired by the Iron Giant, where the pitch line from Brad Burnett, the Iron Giant, is what if a gun had a soul? So I always thought of Omega Supreme is what if the atom bomb had a conscience? And so then it was just a matter of, well, what if we told that story? And what if because we'd already, so what if, and kind of went back to, we knew we wanted to bring RC back. So then it was sort of, well, what if the code, I don't think we ever defined what the code was that she was carrying when she got her memory wiped. So at some point we said, well, what if that was the code for the launch code for Omega Supreme? And then we could sort of connect all of these threads. And then it was just a matter of, we can go as dark as we feel we want to go, that we don't have to quite do that, the lighthearted season 1, animated kind of stories, that we can go a little heavier to those. Literally me going through the existing scripts. And I looked for it earlier. I couldn't find it, but there is a document which is basically, it's a Frankenstein, a literal Frankenstein of the existing scripts, and like outline paragraphs of, this is where this scene will go, and this is where that scene will go, and we're going to yank this subplot out of Three's a Crowd, and that will allow us to bring Megatron and Starscream back. sooner than we had planned.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was piecing it together and making those flashback scenes really carry weight.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask if there were, I'm pretty sure there were scenes like animated already before they told you to
Nothing
make
was
it?
animated. I don't think anything was boarded, but I just went back and looked at and it looks like the first story, the Headmaster story, had gone final. That script had gone final, and I think the other story that we wove in there had gotten to at least second draft script. So we were deep into those, and I think Three's a Crowd had gotten at least a first draft. So yeah, we it was a lot of cut and paste. It was a literal cut and paste job.
Wow.
It's just amazing.
So, but I think also it helped that because everything else had stopped in production, I wasn't having to focus on, say, a half dozen stories at once. I could just put all my my creative energy into this one thing, and they gave us a fair amount of time to put it together. So that, I think, allowed for better quality.
And
That's
so,
nice.
Did you mentioned that the big opening battle with the two teams, was that only added once it became TransWarped? Was that not in the original scripts?
That was not in any of the original
okay.
scripts.
Interesting. And so was the Shockwave and Blur stuff from the second script?
The Shockwave and Blur stuff, I think, was added for TransWarped. Yeah, because we would never have killed off Blur under the unless we were told,
Make it darker.
make it darker. And I think we got to kill somebody off, and we just said, who are we going to kill off? And it's like,
I did a video years ago trying to piece it together. I broke TransWarped apart scene by scene. I could not peg that one. Okay, interesting.
I guess I gotta talk to Jim Sorensen, and maybe we'll do a book just about that.
Oh, please. That would be great. So there's a giant rock lord fighting Sorry in Upgrade. Was that in the original script? And if so, how did that get to Earth without the transwarp stuff, if you remember?
Well, I think the idea was that I think we did set up that Megatron and Starscream were sort of warping around the galaxy, and it was causing problems. So I think maybe in one of those scripts we set that up. I don't remember that specifically, but I think there was a reason for it. I'd have to go back and look at the original script, but that's my recollection.
And then the last specific was, so Bumblebee transwarping around was going to be the B plot of Three's a Crowd. And that makes sense because both of them have that plasma dynamic thruster as the plot device. So were the Autobots like going to be just scouring the mine in the B plot of Three's a Crowd?
In the B plot of Three's a Crowd, again, I'd have to go back and look at that script and remember how that worked. But I believe the B plot of Three's a Crowd, as it exists, was the whole thing about Lugnut having to lug Lugnut out of the crater that he created.
That was wrote into.
That was added later because the original B plot was the Bumblebee warping around the universe stuff.
Okay.
I should have phrased that question. How did Bumblebee get to space in the original version? Didn't think about that until months later. Well, TransWarped will continue to remain an anomaly and a mystery. Thank you, everyone, for watching another rendition of TFA well, not quite. Just thanks for watching this video. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate it. Be sure to follow me on social media, or my social media will follow you, and there's nothing you can do about it. You'll be hunted for the rest of your life. Be sure to tune into the final installment of TFA Mysteries Season 1, coming later this December. We will talk about what Transformers Animated would look like if it were to continue today, and what it would take for the show to truly come back. I'll see you then.